Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ortlieb, and this is Education for Today. We're going to be looking at leadership and personnel, how to deal with conflict, how to make sure that your organization continues on its forward trajectory. Let's go ahead and get into this week's PowerPoint session. The 4 topics that are going to guide this discussion. First is understanding what conflict is within organizations, the different types of conflict, how to think about problem solving on a continuum, and then how to maintain keeping your eye on the prize while putting out fires, but also focusing on larger initiatives, both in the short, mid, and long term. So let's first try to deconstruct what do we mean by conflict. The first tip that I'll give you is to stop trying to run away from your issues in the classroom or your school. We know that time is not necessarily on your side when there are issues that have arisen. If you just give it time, it won't disappear. Instead, it will actually become exacerbated. So time is not your friend, it's your enemy when it comes to conflict resolution. As it says here on the slide, conflict is normal and healthy if it's dealt with in an appropriate fashion. Secondly, conflict arises from differences, and we know that differences and diversity are actually a good thing. How to actually be able to think about multiple perspectives to try to problem solve longstanding issues that may be going on within your classroom or within your school context. Conflict will inevitably happen, and so it's not a matter of trying to prevent it. It's a matter of thinking about how do we address it first and forthrightly. Conflict can either stimulate or hinder progress. And when it's mismanaged, it has the potential to derail not only leaders, but also their entire team's efficacy. Conflict also cannot and should not be avoided. And we all have ways in which we prefer to handle or resolve conflicts, but that doesn't necessarily dictate our course of action. Instead, it's highly situational in terms of how do we effectively deal with conflict when it arises. We also need to think about how do we define conflict? And some researchers suggest it has to do with a couple of different ideas. One around conflict as incompatibility, which simply put means that conflict exists when incompatible activities occur. So this produces a dilemma where if we think about it from a zero-sum game, one person loses and one person wins. And that can actually, in that context, hurt an organization's mission and their ability to follow it out. Disagreements on a task often become misconstrued as personal attacks. Everybody knows and maybe has gone down that road themselves, and that sort of stirs lots of different emotional responses in turn. Secondly, conflict can be intrapersonal or interpersonal, and either of these need to be handled in certain ways to allow the organization to actually benefit from that. So if you're struggling with a personal dilemma, staying late at work, or you just can't get compelled enough to be motivated to send your communicative emails early in the morning to your team, whatever it might be, it could be personal in nature. There are other ones where you might not just be getting along with certain people because of their dispositions or prerogative or attitude or just personality in general. So when we can make and resolve conflict amicably, it can actually lead towards a greater overall organizational dynamic and culture in the process. And that sort of goes against this classical view of organizational conflict. The classical view suggests that the absence of interpersonal friction is necessary for achieving organizational success. However, in more contemporary times, we view conflict as necessary in order to allow for true involvement, empowerment, and democracy within an organizational structure. And well-managed conflict is an investment in the future. Common styles of conflict vary as well. Here's a 5-point scale, if you will, from those that are competing, I win, you lose, towards collaborating, we can both possibly win, towards compromising where neither of us wins, or avoidance where nobody wins, and even accommodating where I'll just take the loss in order for you to actually win. And so if we think about the wars and the conflicts and all those sorts of things that occur within our organizations, Some of that is outside of our control, but what we can control is our style and our approach to how we respond when conflict arises. So instead of trying to prevent conflict, we need to think about how do we mitigate it in the most effective way, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Here is the continuum to think about how do we problem solve in these spaces. So on the far left, we have, it shows where a manager or a leader makes all the decisions and announces it to his or her team. That's a strong use of authority. Whereas if we go further towards the right, then there are more freedom for teammates to be able to utilize their personal autonomy and their decision-making skills towards the results that they seek. So in the middle ground, we have a leader presents tentative decisions that are subject to change, presents ideas and invites other questions or other ideas along the way, presents a problem to get suggestions, all the way towards permits everybody to function within the limits that are found almost in an autonomous way. So these are several factors that influence a leader's decision-making. And the leader has more or less an internal value system, also confidence that depends upon the nature of his or her team, personal inclinations, and even a sense of security within a situation, amongst other factors that really dictate one's problem-solving approach. Team members as well are influenced by their own personality, the expectations placed upon them, amongst others like experience and the comfort in assuming high levels of autonomy and even risk-taking within organizations. So as we've said time and time again, leadership choices are dependent on the situation. Environmental pressures like external stakeholders, deadlines, or even the nature of the problem can dictate our approaches to mitigate conflict. And finally, we're going to talk about how to put out fires versus focusing on building capacity, which are two different things. Tannenbaum and Schmidt remind us that there are 5 long-term objectives to think about rather than just those immediate tasks that we need to be done oftentimes. First is raising employees' motivational levels. We know that if you're not motivated to do something in the short term and in an ongoing capacity, that those people are not going to lead, not going to meet their own expectations or reach their optimum potential. Second, increase team readiness to accept change. Change is definitely a pill not easily swallowed by everyone. Not everyone embraces change. Not everybody embraces a novelty and newness. And so people need to be more and more comfortable with doing that. And the way to do that is not too fast, too soon, but in a methodical, well-articulated, and clearly defined approach. Third is improving the quality of all leadership decisions. There needs to be evidence behind the decisions that you make. Again, that needs to be communicated to all parties so that there aren't misconstrued perspectives on why things happened, and maybe you did it because you had favorites and all this sorts of things. Fourth is we need to develop teamwork and morale, and we do so not by talking, but by getting our hands dirty and doing it with our teammates. We don't need to have different expectations for others on the team. We need to have similar expectations for ourselves. So if we're working on curricular modifications, if we're working on a grant, if we're working on an accreditation visit, if we're working on onboarding some new people to our team, we need to be a part of that process and not just tell others to take part in that. And finally, to further employees' individual development. If you're not hoping and making concerted efforts to push people to do their personal and their professional best, and they're not going to continue to grow in that vein, then how are you really doing your job as a leader of the team to be able to pull people to new heights? Instead, you're focused on those immediate tasks, and in some ways, you're using those other people to accomplish that task. Some keys to resolving conflict. Let's think about these. Keeping your emotions and stress in check. It's not always a personal vendetta that somebody has against you. It just might be that they don't see eye to eye with you on that particular issue. And as a result, conversation and communication is of the utmost importance. Focus on words, not actions, and understanding the conflict. Listening carefully to what others have to say and being aware of the nonverbals that are being communicated in front of you. Ensuring that everyone is being specific, and so that you're not just saying we need to do something about classroom management. No, we need to do something about these particular things within our overall classroom management considerations. Being aware of assumptions, knowing people or the parties who are involved and what are their personalities, how do they connect to this in terms of their personality, their background experiences, where they come from, all those sorts of things impact how somebody experiences or perceives a situation to occur. Moreover, you need to be mindful of relational needs. Some people have a greater need for affirmation. Others just want to be left alone. You need to get to know people on that level to be able to resolve conflicts around multiple personalities. Clarifying the real issues and being able to deal with those individually. Restating what you've heard about the conflict to make sure everyone's on the same page. Avoiding feeling obligated to actually resolve it right then and there. And validating other people's concerns and perspectives ensures that they feel that they are listened to, that their voice matters, and that they're a part of the process. So here are 6 steps in summation around considerations for decision-making when dealing with conflict. Number 1 is to classify the problem. What is it? And in classifying what kind of problem it is, you need to define what that problem is, specifying the answer to the problem, deciding what is right, not just what is acceptable, what is ideal, what do we need to really do to put this into better perspective. Building the action to be able to carry it out. So not just that big vision, but also the mission. How do we actually execute it? And then on the back end, testing the overall validity and effectiveness of the approach that you put in relation to actually what transpired. Because sometimes good goals aren't always executed in a way that the objectives can be achieved, but nevertheless, we need to be able to examine that in order to change course at a later date. I hope that you found this video helpful in some way as we think about leadership and conflict, and as we make efforts to be able to resolve those in amicable ways with all of our personnel on our teams. My name is Evan Ortlieb again. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and stay tuned for more videos on education for today.